You are listening to The Catholic Wire.
Welcome to The Catholic Wire. I'm your host, Isabel Martinez, and you're listening to The Young Woman. Joining me today is Father Zepeda to discuss a book titled The Catholic Woman. Hello, Father. Thank you for being here.
Hello, Isabel. It's good to be here.
Father, you mentioned a book you wanted to use for some of this podcast.
Yeah, well, first of all, I have to say it's always fun to record when we're doing it. We struggled a little bit to start the show. No, but it's really fun. So, yeah, I want to share with you, it's been, when I'm preparing these shows, it's been a little bit of a challenge to find the material that I want because, the truth be told, there are not many books out there about the Catholic woman, but there's actually one in particular that I found that I thought it was really interesting, and this author, basically what he's doing, he wrote a book about all the women in the gospel, which I hope we can also kind of cover. And then after he wrote that book, he decided he wanted to write about the role of women in the Catholic history, in Catholic history, I should say. And going from the women at the time of the fathers of the church to the Middle Ages to the modern times. And as he started doing this, actually he meant to do only an article, kind of like a study. And as he started working on that, he realized there was so much material that he started writing, and he ended up writing 2 books about this. So I thought it was really, really interesting, and I hope we can cover some of those topics. I just think I haven't read the whole book, so it's kind of like I'm using it as an inspiration and then working from there. I don't feel safe in recommending the book just yet. But it's definitely going to be a good point to start.
That sounds fantastic. Can you tell us a little bit more about what he says in this particular book? Sure.
He starts with something really interesting. He actually starts by making an analysis of creation and how the words that God used when he was creating man and woman. And so that actually hit a note for me, because he says, he analyzes the words of God, where he says, "It is not good for man to be alone. Let us make him a help like unto himself." And from this, I gathered 2 things, and he gathers the same. The first one is that, the relationship of man and woman is not the same for both sides. And this is something that we have discussed, maybe. While man has his origin from the slime of the earth and the creation of God, it's interesting to remember that woman had her origin from man. That's like there is a certain dependence there. Her body was originated from man's body. There's a certain dependence, but there is also a very beautiful thought in there, in the matter that it brings home the concept of the union of the man with the woman, the fact that we cannot live without working with each other. You know what I mean?
Right.
The whole idea of separating man and woman and having each one do their own thing is just something that is not even in our order of nature, because women came from man. And, it works the other way around, because also who gave birth to men after that? Everybody's born from a woman. So this is something that actually we want to cover in future episodes. Maybe not, I'm not sure if in here or even in the Christian Mother. But I remember growing up, for us, the concept of mother and motherhood was a sacred concept. And I think that's something that needs to be brought back. I'm going off the topic here, but it goes on this same topic. When we see woman, we see someone that, again, is a mother or has the ability of being a mother. And that alone makes her sacred. So I don't know, I thought that was a really interesting concept, the fact that to remind women that they come from man, that's their origin comes from there, and that's the unity of the whole of mankind.
Right. No, that I agree that it's definitely something we've lost to an extent in the world that, like you said, that we as women, I am able to bear a child. My mother is one of the women I respect most in this world. Women, like mothers, are just incredible. So yeah, I think that it should definitely be a topic someone covers in the future on this network about this all, because it is something that is so sacred, but it has definitely lost its people. The world has definitely taken how sacred it is and just brought it through the mud completely.
Yeah. So the other concept that I thought was really interesting is that, the words from God, where it says, it is not good for man to be alone. And that is, the author here says, this is a social order that is established by God from the very beginning. That is not good for man to be alone. Just as it's not good for woman to be alone, it's not good for man to be alone. They're supposed to work together. And that is, if you think about it, that's such a powerful concept. It's like man cannot do, I'm always struggling with saying man or men. I'm not sure which one I'm saying actually, but I'm sure you get the gist of it. But, man is not supposed to, he's not able to do things by himself. Yes, it's possible, it's possible for man to do something by himself, and the same a woman could also do something by herself, but it's not good. The words of God is not good for him to be alone. It's not good for him to work alone. And so the woman exists as a complement and a helper of man. And that doesn't mean, when we hear that, immediately some people might be like, oh, again, I repeat what we have repeated before, and we're going to repeat it tons of times. That doesn't make her less than men. It's just the role, that's the part that you play.
Right.
But it is interesting to see that the man needs the woman just as the woman needs the man. And something that I thought was really interesting is this. If you think about it, in every important part of history, in every important event of history, there was always women behind, or even working alongside men. And let's go just to the most important event on all of creation, which is redemption. In redemption itself, you have the God-man who was able to do things by himself. He was very able to do things by himself, and he did not want to do it alone. And when you think that even God himself he could have done everything by himself, and he had a woman working next to him. So even in every part of history, even in that one, in every important event, there is always woman working next to men.
Right. And I think that it was for so long that we believed, I don't necessarily believe this, but for so long society has said women were behind men, women were after men, women were lower than men. We're not lower, like we'll say this so many more times on this podcast, that we're not lower than men. We're next to men. We play a different role than men, though. I remember I forget which father, but when I was younger, one of the priests in a sermon said, the man is maybe the head of the family, but the woman is the heart of the family. And the heart often, sometimes not so, realistically, not so often, this isn't a good thing, but sometimes the heart the brain takes into consideration what the heart wants. The brain, like the head always does that. You always want to follow what your heart wants, but the brain, you know what I'm trying to say. I think that the brain, they work together. The heart knows what the head wants, and the head knows what the heart wants, and they work together. And
that's such a good point, actually. I'm going to interrupt you there because I like to do that. But just kidding. No, but that's such a good point, though. It's such a really good point. We're going to talk about that, too, because, what do you have? If you have a brain without a heart, you have a cold psychopath.
Exactly.
You have someone that is just going to work,
They're
in
a
a cold
machine.
fashion, a machine, yeah. And if you have a heart without a brain, then you have a total disorder. You have someone that is just passion, is just doing everything without any reason. That is such a good point, because that's exactly what it is. Man brings a side of it, and woman needs a side of it. And they, when I find this interesting is when I have helped with some marriage counseling. When you're working in a marriage and you do some marriage counseling, you realize exactly that, what you're saying, that man has one side of the story, woman has the other side of the story, and they kind of need to work together and bring those parts. Man has to realize that woman is different, and man is a brain, the woman is a heart, and they work together. It's a very simplistic way to put it. Of course, there's more to that. But
at the end of the day,
that's so true. They have to think of, they both have to consider their opinions and their inclinations and their wants.
And that's so important for us, especially girls and young women entering relationships with young men that one day we might marry, because sometimes things will happen and you'll think that he's being cold and he doesn't care or something, but in reality, he's seeing it from a different angle, and he's analyzing it and taking care of whatever the situation is, sometimes more logically, sometimes more, okay, this get down to business, figure it out, and work, like more problem solving than emotionally becoming invested in it.
Yeah, and if you think about it, that makes perfect sense, given the role of man and woman, because, if you're a man, you have to go out to work, and if you were emotional in your work, you would suffer a lot, and you see it right now that men are more emotional than they should be. They go out to a job and they're like getting affected in the job, and, if they yell at them or someone is rude at them, they take it personally, and it's like, usually men don't get affected by those things. You can be a guy and be working at a factory, for example, and they can be cursing at you or telling you names or whatever, and you're just like there to get the job done. And when you get back home, that doesn't really get you too much. While if you were a woman, that would be something that would be very, very harmful for you, and vice versa. You have the woman, she's at home, she's able to understand her children, she's able to connect with people at home, she's able to work with other people from the family and to bring them together and get them to work, who knows what, because she's able to understand the personalities of people and their feelings and all that stuff. While if you had a guy and a child comes crying, he's going to be like, what are you doing? Get back to your
yeah, exactly.
It's like he's not going to have any empathy there, or very few. So we're designed to work with those roles. Now, something that here's what got me the most from this part that I was reading from the book. Isabel, I had an idea this afternoon, by the way, cutting short, cutting and going into something else. When sometimes we're recording and we are tired, especially like today, it's a little bit late and I can be tired and my accent goes really thick. And I was thinking, I'm going to get you a bell or something so that if the accent starts getting like really thick, you can just go like, ding. They'll be like, oh, okay. Go back to speaking with a good English accent.
I don't think it's a very thick accent right now, but
I don't think the bell would be really effective anyway.
I don't think so either. I think you just be like, okay, it's a bell. Like, you would just not pay attention. You just keep going, probably.
Okay, just kidding. No, I might do it at some point. Yeah, at least he'll make the audience laugh. No, but what I found really interesting about this book is that obviously you're expecting to go into the things that you've always heard, and the first thing that this author says, he's a priest, obviously, is that this cooperation of woman takes place in the church, in the state, and in the family. And he says the devil has tried to get the woman out of that influence. He's tried to get the woman out of that, of influencing the state, the church, and the family. And the church is actually trying to do the opposite. The church is actually trying to have the woman influence in all those three places in her proper place. Someone might be listening to this right now and going, oh, they're feminists and whatever. No. I do have to say it. It is true. man has the role of leadership and woman doesn't. Woman has the role of helping man, and that's just true.
Right.
But the church wants the woman to have that influence in there. And something that I commented on this one time when we were, I think you were in that class when I said this. The role of leadership doesn't mean to be more. And I experienced this myself. When I was in the seminary, and this is gonna get personal here, but it's okay. I was in the seminary once, and obviously when you're a guy, you try to be a leader. You try to be the superior, or the one that has more leadership on something. And this is something that we're going to cover in the shows with the young men. And at one point I realized, okay, that's not my role. There is we have a group of guys here, a group of seminarians, and there is one here that has way more leadership than I do. He's way better than I am at commanding and putting people to work. So what is my role here? My role is to follow, not to lead. And that is, it might feel like a painful decision to make because it hurts your pride. But when you make it, you realize, okay, it's just a role. It's just a job. He has the job to lead. I have the job to follow. That doesn't make me any less. It's just something that is necessary. When you have a restaurant or any kind of business or work or teamwork or sport, you have some people that do one role and other people do other roles. The role of leading is just another job, and the role of following is another job. You can be better or higher in merit than the leader. You know what I mean?
Right, exactly.
Like you could have a woman, and we have an example with our Blessed Mother and Saint Joseph. Saint Joseph was the leader. Saint Joseph was the one that had the responsibility to lead. But our Blessed Mother was higher than Saint Joseph in sanctity, in merit, in grace. But she still filled that role. It's just a role that we fill. And that is I think this is going to be such a revelation to a lot of people right now in the world, because the devil tells you, lead, be the superior. You have to command. You have to be the one that gives orders. That's not even being better. That doesn't mean being better. It's just a job. You know what I mean?
And sometimes I think that it's in society, we are, again, like you just said, we're told to lead. But some people just aren't, and again, some people just aren't good leaders.
Exactly.
In certain situations, am not a good leader. I am not good at decision making. I am not good at, especially hard decisions. I'm not good at that. And I'm okay with that sometimes. Other times, I very much feel like an oldest child sometimes. So I am in charge when it comes to me and my three younger sisters. I am the one telling them, okay, this is what we're doing. You do this, you do that, you do this, and I'll do this. And that works better than if the sister right below me were to do so. She would not work well under that sort of, not pressure, but she wouldn't work well in knowing which sister is good at doing what. So you have to recognize where your talents can be used.
Mm-hmm,
it's
exactly.
You're not always going to be a talented leader. Mm-hmm. Almost never are you going to always be a talented leader. But like you said, in society, we're being told to lead and to take initiative and to take charge and all that sort of thing. And it's presented to us in such a positive way, like, oh yeah, I can do this. This is nothing. And yeah, it might not seem like much, but when you start getting into the different roles that a leader does play, like the different responsibilities that a leader has, I should say, it becomes a lot more than just a title. And just like a follower, it becomes a lot more than just a follower. That's just a blanket title for all of the things that a follower does or a leader does. It's just a blanket title, like I said. So,
because they need each other,
right? Because nothing would get. Sorry, you go ahead, Father.
Yeah, the leader needs the people below him to do what they need to do, and the people under need the leader too, because you need someone to be giving commands. And something that is really interesting is this, and this is again personal story. When I first joined the monastery, obviously you're taking orders, and there's a superior that doesn't take orders. And, immediately your following human nature goes like, whoa, that would be really cool to be a superior. Then you get to make decisions, and you get to decide what's going to be done in the convent, and you get to, tell people what you actually get to do, what you want to do, what you think is the best idea, whatever. And it just seems like such a cool thing to do. And so again, the devil moves us to want to be superiors, to want to be in the top position. But then when you actually get to those positions, it's a pain. It's a real torture, because being a superior is actually, you have a lot of burden on your back. No one likes you because you're the one giving orders. You have to take all the blunt of your decisions, and you have no one to back down to. When you're under someone, you can always say, well, that was someone else that told me to do that. It's his responsibility. When you're the superior, you can't say that. It's all your responsibility. And unless you're president, current president. Let's not get into politics here.
Not this episode.
But yeah, I mean, you know what I mean? So the conclusion is just that. Being a superior or being in the position of authority is not being more, and it's not even a privilege. It's just another job, and sometimes it's even more burdensome of a job. Now, this is what I found really interesting, that the fact that the woman has influence in the church, in the state, in the family, and the church is actually pushing for her to have that influence, and the devil is actually pushing to get her out of that.
Right. So we kind of covered where in like the family the woman has her influence, but where would you say it? Oh, and in the church a little bit, we kind of touched on that, but like where in the state would you say the woman has her influence?
Well, for example, in the family, well, it's pretty obvious, yes. In the church, we have, sisters work with the priests as well. And not only that, I mean, lay women have done a lot in the church. And in the state, woman would work as an influencer next to her husband, or next to the king, or next to the president. And now, here I'm not saying that women cannot get involved in politics. That's, again, not their natural role. But if you look at Catholic history, it's very interesting to see that in the Catholic society, women were working with men also in the state. So you have, for example, the kings in the Catholic monarchies. They were working with the queen. The queen was actually kind of like a first lady. She was also there influencing the king. She was being the heart of the decisions, right. So that the king would not be just a heartless ruler. And you would see queens actually doing a lot of things for the church and for the state. You had, for example, Queen Isabella of Spain.
Right.
Don't get proud of your name.
I'll try.
But she did a huge amount of things for the church, and the queens of Spain actually were pretty strong. But I want to go into, if you're okay with that, I want to go in what the devil is doing to try to prevent that. I want to go in what the devil has done to try to get women out of that position of influence.
Right.
I think this is going to be really interesting because, a lot of girls, everybody, I myself found myself surprised when I was reading this. Everybody thinks that it's the other way around. It's very interesting to read someone, a Catholic priest, that is saying, no, it's the devil that is trying to get the women out of their position of influence. And so, for example, first in the Catholic Church, the church wants women to work with the priest, right? And to work in the church as well in many other positions. What is the devil trying to do? The devil's trying to isolate them, and particularly from being an aid of the priest. What we have seen, for example, lately, is to make women think that the position of a religious, of a nun, is a position of servitude, a position that is useless, a position that is burdensome, where they're almost like slaves. It's like a false idea that the devil puts sometimes. And particularly, he's been trying to destroy the religious congregations, the idea of a nun of nuns as religious, because he knows how helpful they are. And I can tell you as a priest, we need sisters. They are so helpful to us. Not only to us, but, they're a big part of God's plan in the church. Give you an example of this. The founder of the Congregation for the Propagation of the Faith, the one that started that congregation, not the congregation properly speaking, but the idea, was a woman, a lay woman, not even a nun.
Really?
The Propagation of the Faith, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that is an organization that was worldwide, that what they would do is they would get collections from the whole world and send it to the missions. And thanks to them, they started missions in China, Japan, Africa, everywhere in the world. It became a huge thing in the church, like one of the greatest movements in the church, in the Catholic Church, up till Vatican II, obviously. And the founder of that was a lay woman, not even a nun. It's a lay woman. So you see there what a big role women have exerted in the church. But the devil tries to take that away, by saying, no, that's, here in the church, they have all these ideas and, they're going to bring you down and you're going to be like a slave. So no, actually, I think it's really interesting. If you ask any sister, I'm sure they'll tell you that the marriage position in marriage is probably much more difficult than being a sister.
And I saw you wrote that in some of the notes, and I thought back to almost every time I've had a discussion with a religious sister, whether it be I've only ever met sisters from the CMRI and the CMD congregations, but they have each said, when I've had this discussion, when you're struggling with your vocation as a sister, you realize that you realize that your spouse can do no wrong. He can't. It's Jesus. He can't do wrong. He is God. He is perfect. When something is wrong, not wrong, but when the only one that can make mistakes in this relationship is you. That's it. And so it becomes so much easier to communicate with your spouse that way because it's Jesus and you can just talk to him anytime and he knows exactly what's in your heart and he knows exactly what's going on in your head. And that was just so like, oh wait, that is so true. Like it was kind of shocking to hear, not shocking, but it was eye-opening to hear that from the sisters I've talked to about the religious vocation, that it just, you don't feel like you don't feel like you're going to ever be worthy of his love, but you know he loves you and he chose you. A friend of mine joined the convent and we're about the same age, and I was talking to her and I was like, are you scared? She said, no. And I said, are you upset that you are being called to this? And she said, no. She's like, I was talking to sister so-and-so, and she told me, like, I asked her, I told her that I asked God, why me? Like, why are you asking me to do this? Why me? And she's like, and the sister responded to my friend, yeah, exactly. Why you? Why do you, like, why you? Yeah. Out of everybody God could have had, why did he pick you? What's so great about you that he's calling you to be his wife? Mm-hmm. And that sent her through a loop. She was like, oh, right. What did I do to deserve this? Like, he's asking me to give everything to him. I get to give everything to him. Who deserves that? Yeah. She's like, I don't deserve that. I'm not nearly worthy of getting to do that. So that was something that I found pretty interesting to hear from a sister.
Yeah, I can relate. I definitely can relate. And that is, that's the thing is, it's important to clarify here, or to say, to put things clearly. Marriage is good. Marriage is a beautiful vocation that God calls to marriage. But the religious life is better. And that's something that is actually a teaching of the church, that, it's condemned by the church to say the opposite. Religious life is better. It's a privileged position, actually. And there are so many aspects of it that are so much better, than marriage. Again, marriage is a beautiful vocation if you're called to it. But sometimes people have the idea that being in marriage is kind of like a position of pleasure, and you get to do whatever you want, and you have freedom. And no, it's just like any other vocation. You're being called to a cross. But the religious life has so many advantages. When I think about it, and you're looking at it from the heart, that's beautiful. Now let's look at it from my side, the cold brain, logical side. No, but it's true. I mean, I totally relate with what you were saying. But even if you look at it from practical sides, it's like you're going into a position where you're pretty much guaranteed that you're going to save your soul. Everything around you, it's conspiring to save your soul. Like in the world, you have so many risks. Here you don't. You're going into a position where you have so many warranties, so many safeguards for your life. You know, if you go into a marriage, so many things can go wrong. If you become a religious, yes, there are some things that could go wrong as well. But in all honesty, there are so many safeguards. You know, like you have other sisters to watch over you. You have a superior that watches over you. You have so many priests that, you know, you can go to for advice. You have all these good books, good materials, good talks that they give to you to kind of learn. And I'm not trying to convince you to join the cover, but you know, this is the truth. Because I need you here for the podcast,
right,
so
right.
don't do that just yet.
Okay.
And even the, you know, one thing that one gets a lot when one is called to the religious life, we're going to have a podcast about this, but we're going off the topic as we usually do. One thing that one usually gets a lot is you know, I wanted to have a family. And I can relate to that. When I was called to the priesthood, you know, one of the things that at first got me was the idea, well, I wanted to have a family. But the thing is, the promises of our Lord are true. When you become a religious, you have a huge family, like a really big one.
Yeah.
You have a bunch of children that you have to take care of. You have a bunch of sisters that you have to, you know, you're with. You have a father also and a mother, because the sister superior usually acts a lot like a mother.
Yeah.
And not only that, you have them for a long time. You know, you're not going to lose them. You're going to die first before you lose any of your members of your family. You're going to lose one, but then there's another bunch of more people that are going to take their place. So I don't know. There's a lot of advantages to that, but we're totally going off the topic. But the point is, sorry.
Well, I just remember like a couple of times, like the sister that was in charge of me when I lived in Omaha, I still say she is like my second mom. She took care of us girls day and night when we were sick, when we were homesick, when we were just having rough days. She was our mom. And then the priests, I remember one time, one of our priests in Omaha, we asked him where he was, if he was going to go home to his family, like his earthly family, for the holidays. And he said, no, I'm not able to this year. But when you're a priest, everybody is your family. You don't run out of, like, just like you said, you don't run out of family. You get way more family than you ever thought you would. So
honestly, yes,
it's a great advantage that in the religious life, the amount of support you have.
Yeah, I remember a couple times when we were watching the Border Boys and they got sick, and it was just kind of funny because you get like these motherly instincts inside of you, and I would go there and make tea for them and then go into their bed, and it's like, here's something, because, you know, you're always mean to them. You know, you're like, get up, you know, it's time to go to mass, and, you know, get up to your bed, bring them out of the bed.
Border Boys, so.
Yeah, sometimes I would, you know, pour like cold water in their face so that they get up. That's if they don't get up, you know, after a long time. But, you know, so when they get sick, it's your time to be nice. And, you know, that I would go there and, you know, give them some warm tea, and here's your medicine, and how are you feeling? Are you doing okay? You just lay down in your bed, don't worry about it. And you get that part of being kind of like a mother or a father. Father Selner was the father. I was a mother, so I was a kind one. Father Selner is kind of like the authority. See, that's a position of authority. I was a follower. He was the authority. Just kidding. I don't know if I'll cut that one or not. Okay, here's one of the ones that I found most interesting. You were asking about that. How does a woman have a role in the state? This is what I found super interesting, because, you know, when you go to public schools, and even I think most of us in Catholic schools, we might have the idea that back in the Middle Ages and, you know, in the time of the monarchies, the woman was, you know, relegated to the back, basically to the kitchen, and the king was an authoritarian ruler and all that stuff. You know, we all hear that, right?
Right, exactly.
And it's very interesting when you read Catholic history and you read what this author says himself. He was from Italy, I think. That actually, at the time, what I was mentioning to you before, at the time of the Catholic monarchies, women were actually held up. They were held next to the king. It was usual for the king to actually have his wife next to him and to make decisions consulting his wife, which is amazing. You never hear that in books of history. And I'm sure it's so amazing that I'm sure a lot of people listening to this show are going to be like, oh, that's not true. That's not true at all. But when you actually look at the Middle Ages and you look at even past the Middle Ages, around the time of the Renaissance, you would always see the king with the queen, and the queen actually making decisions and helping the king, again, as a helper. In some cases, the queen actually would step up and had to take the place. But for example, one that rings a bell a lot to me is, again, Queen Isabella of Spain. It was the Catholic, I don't know how to say it in English, but in Spanish, it was the reyes católicos, meaning the king and queen Catholic. I don't know what would be the plural for that? I don't know if there is a plural. It would be like saying the royal couple.
Right. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
That's what they were called, the royal couple. It wasn't just the king. It was always the royal couple. And they were the ones together. They were the ones that founded the discovery of America. They were the ones that founded Christopher Columbus. Together, they were the ones that reconquered Spain from the Moors, from the Muslims. Together, they were the ones that expelled the Jewish also out of Spain. That's something that will be covered maybe in an episode of history. But they always did those things together, so much so that the queen actually was in the battlefield next to the king.
I had no idea that was happening.
Here's the charming part. She would be in the battle, and she would be with the king, and they would make decisions, and, she would be an advisor to the king. She would give him the place. He was the one that making decisions, and she would go back and maybe sew during the battle.
Okay.
She was an excellent sewer. She would sew all the clothing of the king.
Wow.
That's not a position of servitude. She did that because she wanted to do it. And there is so many cool stories about her. There is one story, and I'll have to get this one, but there was a story where there was basically a duel. They were in front of a Muslim army, and basically the same thing that David and Goliath. There came a giant from the Muslims, and he challenged the Spaniards. And one of the Spaniards that was like a really short guy, really stocky but really short guy, came up and he said to the king, he's not going to be talking to us like that, and I'm going to go over there and basically kick his rear end. And I hope that's proper.
I mean, I think that's probably the best way to put it.
Okay, well, he said something like that. It's in Spanish, so I can put it in English. And the queen said to him, "You're way too small." Like the queen said to him, "I don't want you to go because we all appreciate you here. You're a really good soldier, but this guy is way beyond your league." And the guy says like, "No, with the help of God, everything can be done and everything." And the queen says like, the queen didn't want him to go. So he ended up going on the challenge. She couldn't see it. So she actually went back, and she didn't want to face them because she didn't want to see it happening. And she was praying the rosary while these things were happening. So the guy runs on a horse right against the other guy, and they're running on a horse, and the Spanish guy hit him so hard that his spear went through the armor, through the guy, and it got the horse on the rear end.
Whoa.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he went so hard through him that it went through all the way up to the horse. So, again, we're going off the topic here, but the point is that the woman was actually very much involved. When this stopped happening, when did the woman lose her influence? Do you know that?
I don't know.
Of course you don't, but I say that so that I get the question. Just kidding. Here, this is super interesting because I actually didn't know this, or it didn't click in my head. The moment when women started being pushed back, say to the kitchen and to the living room, and get out of the government, or stop influencing in the government, was at the same time that the Catholic monarchies were being brought down by anti-Catholic groups of power, by secret societies, by Masonry, and all those things. Basically, at the moment where they realized they wanted to bring down the Catholic monarchies. And here's what happened. They realized the queen is the one that is bringing the priests into the the influence circle of the king. So they started this is at the time of the French Revolution, and a little bit before that, the French philosophers and the secret societies and all these anti-Catholic movements started bringing out the idea of saying the priest should be out of the court, he should stay in the sacristy, and the woman brings always the priest. So we need to get the woman out of the court as well. She should stay in the living room. She should stay in her house. She should not be here at all. And here, you, the king, you are the total king. You're totalitarian. You are the state. You know, that was the moment of absolutism. You're familiar with that in history? Like King Louis XIV and all that stuff.
Right, he was an absolute leader and all that sort of thing, and no one really had a say in anything anymore.
Exactly. And here's the interesting part, that everybody attributes that mindset to the church. It didn't come from the church. It came from the forces that were working against the church, because precisely what they wanted to do is get the king alone, get the king out of the influence of the woman and of the church, and then he's ours. Then we can move him and he can do whatever we want. And that's exactly what happened. Once they had the king alone, they brought down the Catholic monarchies. Isn't that amazing to think about that?
Yeah, because you're to go back to an analogy we had, you're taking the head away from the heart. You're making him a machine, and then you can use it to your benefit rather than the benefit of the people and of the benefit then of the church, because the church is here for us to help us get to heaven.
Mm-hmm. And here's how that happened. First they got the priests by offering them more money, or more positions of power outside of the government, or rather get them occupied with greed or something like that. And this is what this author says. And the woman, they got them by vanity. Then they started promoting vanity with women, especially in the courts, so that they would be distracted with something else. And of course, they didn't want to have anything to do with the king and with the government, or being with the king over there. And what I think is really interesting is what happened after that. As soon as the woman got out of the picture and the priest got out of the picture as well, that's when you got the French Revolution, and then you get Napoleon, and then you have all of Europe immersed into war and chaos, bringing down all the Catholic governments to put instead a revolutionary government. And it was just a total destruction. And one of the necessary steps for that was to remove women out of the picture. Now, just to give you an idea of the difference, and well, you've probably read this, but to give you an idea of how different things were, this is something that also surprised me. King Louis XVI was the one that was king during the French Revolution, and he had a horrible life. I mean, he was a really good king, actually, but the French Revolution treated him like dirt. I mean, they mocked him, they humiliated him in public. Like, it was really humiliating what he had to go through. And I'm surprised to read to the very last moment of the revolution, where he was actually they were actually contemplating, I'm going to die. He was contemplating the moment where they were going to cut his head off. He had nothing else. It was just him and his wife. And they were, by that time, they were no longer kings. They were prisoners of the French Revolution. To that point, he would call his wife my lady. And there is actually a phrase of him, a quote from him, where he came to her and he said, my lady, everything is lost. There's nothing more I can do. To that point, he called her with utter respect, my lady. And to the very last point, he was a gentleman. That's how things were before the French Revolution. During the French Revolution, what happens? Woman gets totally brought down. This word, I struggle with it in English a lot. I don't know. Woman gets totally belittled and brought down in her dignity. And what kind of things were happening in the French Revolution? There is a famous instance. At one point, they grabbed a prostitute and they made her dressed up as the goddess Reason, supposedly, obviously in a very grossly immodest way. And they put her on an altar as a supposed new deity. And so everything was, give yourself to your passions and, just forget about God, forget about all morals. And where was woman now? She wasn't my lady anymore. Now she was nothing more but a base object. And that's exactly what we see in society right now. I don't know. That's a very, very, very big contrast of how.
Yeah,
things were
no, and
before.
it's just how you can see people. Sorry, I'm having trouble figuring out the words for this, but the French Revolution, the world today looks at it as something that was necessary. But as Catholics, we know Marie Antoinette was a very, very holy woman, and the things they did to her was it was awful. But like you said, Louis the 16th, I heard that quote before, "My lady, there's nothing to be done," essentially. You do forget sometimes in the world, being in the world, it's hard to remember that man is supposed to respect women.
Yes.
We're meant to respect women, and it's hard to remember that, especially in the world where we're told that we're the same as man, that we're told we're the same as man. Then men get it in their brains that they don't have to respect us.
Exactly. That's the worst part of it, because it's like, okay, if you're the same than me, then I can call you names. We can joke around. It's terrible. But we have to get to the solution, though. Let's just cover really quickly what happened with the family, and then we'll go to the solution. Okay?
Yes.
Because I can hear that you're getting depressed. Let's not get there.
I'll try.
Just kidding. Okay, so what happened in the family? In the family, it's very interesting as well. People have the idea that is the church saying, oh, the woman is just made, for the kitchen and for the living room and blah, blah, blah. No, again, it's quite the opposite. It was the church that was saying, the woman has to be there in the business for the family. She has to be there in the education for the children. She actually has a very strong influence in the family. But the anti-Catholic forces, the same forces that I was talking about, the ones that were promoting revolution, the ones that were trying to bring down the morals, the Catholic morals, those same forces were the ones that started pushing for women to be seen as nothing else but a thing for the pleasure of men, someone to prepare food for men and to carry his children. It was the Masonic forces, the revolutionary forces, the philosophers of that age, of the French Revolution, who were saying, she has no saying in the business of the family. She has no saying in the education of the children. The education of the children and the business of the family should be only the men doing it. And here's the thing. The children should be educated by the state, by public schools. And that's where you have the origin of public schools. It's an effort to remove women from that field of action, of saying, no, you're not going to raise your children. The state is supposed to raise your children. Because you're supposed to be just an object of pleasure and someone in the kitchen and someone in the living room. So again, it's not the church that said that. It was actually the other forces. What does the church say? The church says you're supposed to be a companion of your husband. You're both supposed to make decisions together. Yes, he has the last saying. Yes, he has authority. But you're supposed to be there. You're supposed to be working as a team. You're supposed to be educating your children. That's your excuse me. You see, I told you that. Your first responsibility, the church wants you to be there. You're a huge part of this. And so it's very important to see that's what it is. What happens when you separate them like that? Well, what we're seeing now, man is deprived of that help. He is deprived of the woman's piety, of her religion, because the religion of the woman usually is stronger. And so you take the religion of the woman and the man falls down in religion and morals, because it's actually a lot of the morals of man and his religion is held by the woman. You take away the good sense that she had in regards to the family and her affection and her heart. And what happens to her when she is taken out of that protective environment, which is the family? She's belittled and degraded. She becomes a thing and an instrument of pleasure. And here's the thing. What were they pushing for at that time also? They were pushing also for divorce, because they knew that if they got divorced into society, they destroyed the family and they separated the man from the woman. Woman was defenseless and she would lose her morals. And man was defenseless and he had no more religion because he didn't have the help of the woman anymore. You know what I mean? So that's how the devil has been working against the influence of woman in the family, in the state, and in the church.
Yeah. That's
Bam.
a lot.
Now, what's the solution? Let's go to the solution. Or do you have any comments?
No, not really. You pretty much covered everything. So,
Okay, what do we have to do? We need to remember that man and woman are supposed to work together in every field. That's what the church wants. That the woman exerts her influence as a helper, as an aid, as an influencer. Now the word is actually well used, as an influencer of man. We also need to remember that in this cooperation, well, I just said it, that women are the collaborators and the help of men. And this doesn't make them more or less, as we said. It just means the role that they have to play. They have that responsibility. Now, we need to remember that the devil wants to separate us. He wants to separate men from women, and he wants to make them both refuse their role. He wants to make men not take ownership and not take responsibility, and he wants to make women not take that place of influence next to men in the church, in the state, and in the family. So we have to bring back that influence of men and the taking of responsibility and ownership, and we have to bring back that idea of the woman helping men and being there at all times next to him as an angel, as a good advisor, as a moral help, as a moral support. A man and a woman together, working together, are super strong if they're both in the same view. They cannot be defeated, and that's why the devil is so afraid of them. If they're separated, he can defeat them, he can conquer them. So we need to understand that and work together. That's, in short, I would say the solution.
That's so important that you do have to look at the people in your lives, like, to see that power of man and woman being so strong together. You have to look at your parents. You have to look at your friends who are married. You have to look at the priests and sisters in your life that work so hard to keep you on track with your faith and everything. And you have to find some sort of inspiration in all of that, because without it, you're not going to succeed. If you aren't, with whichever vocation, you're just not going to succeed without the help of those around you, and of course, with the help of God and our Blessed Mother. That's the best power duo out there of a man and a woman, is between our Lord and Our Lady.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Every time that you have an exorcism, you're praying to both of them, and it seems like every time that the church wants us to pray to our Lord, she's always there as well. So that's how God created things. I guess that's the conclusion of the idea that we're trying to bring home this today. That's how God created things, so that man and woman would work together, each one in their role. And they are very powerful like that. And you're right with what you say, because I've seen it in my family too. I see it in my family. I remember I'm very blessed with my parents, both my father and my mother. And I remember my mother, she would be at home, but she would be always backing up the business of my dad. My dad was a worker, but he wasn't a saver, so he wouldn't save money.
Right.
And my mother would save money without him knowing. And it was just very, very funny, because one day, did I tell this story before or not?
I don't think so.
One day she comes up to him and she goes like, I saw this beautiful house, and it's like over here and whatever. He's like, no way, we can't afford that. It's way too expensive. I don't have any money. I do. It's like, where do you have the money? Well, I've been saving it. She would ask him for money, and then he was like, yeah, sure, here's the money. And she would be saving it. And she saved it for like 3 years, 4 years. I don't know how long. She had enough money to buy the house. And it's funny, right now, their support, when they're retired, most of their support comes from the efforts of my mother, that was saving all that money and making I don't know how you call that, but somewhere to lay back. It's just really amazing when you have, again, man and woman working together. And just a sneak peek on the following shows, actually, we're going to cover what you were just saying. This author says, we have to convince woman that she is a very strong moral power. And we have to convince her that she's a very strong moral power in both ways. she can create a lot of evil if she's evil, and she can create a lot of good if she's good. And the first thing that we need to convince her of is her own dignity, her own position of how much respect she deserves. Again, that doesn't mean that she's the leader. She's not the leader, but she deserves a lot of respect because she is sacred in a certain way. And that's what's been lost, the idea of woman as a sacred being, as someone that demands respect just from her own nature. And that's what this author is going to try to bring home to us in the future episodes, hopefully, if I make justice to his writings.
No, that's something that I'm excited to hear about, because it's not talked a lot about. That's not talked about, a lot anywhere at all. So
no, and you don't see it. You certainly don't see it in the media or movies or music. Forget about that. It's horrible.
Yeah, exactly. So it's frustrating it is frustrating, and it brings you down a lot to hear the way people speak about women and how they treat women and what they think about women. It's so frustrating to hear. But when you read things like this book, I'm sure it's all the more uplifting to see what someone with a good head on their shoulders knows about women and how they're supposed to be respected and treated. So,
yeah,
and it's always nice
for that.
Yeah,
Sorry,
and it's also but it's important that young women know that you also need, and young men, whoever you are, you need to earn the respect of others. You should always be nice to people and be courteous of how others feel and all that sort of thing. But to have for anyone to respect you at all, you need to earn it. No one is, you're not going to just automatically be respected because you're a woman or you're a man. You don't get that. That's not how it works. You get respected by your actions and your virtue and everything like that.
Yes, and you said it in the first episode, your modesty. One of the huge things how you earn respect is modesty. You know, when a person is modest, not only in the dressing, but in the manner, in the gait, in the behavior. When a person is modest, it's like it immediately brings you down to respect her or to respect him. You know, it's amazing, but I don't know if you think about it, if you know some people that perhaps are very, very modest, you can't argue with them, you can't yell at them, you can't insult them. Because it's like a invisible shield that as soon as you see them, that modesty strikes you with some kind of majesty, and you're like, boom, I can't, I can't touch this person.
Exactly.
I can't make fun of them or anything, because it's like, this person is a column, it's like a statue, it's a monument. You know, when they have that modesty, you just can't touch them. I guess we have been too long. I think this has been a good show, so we want to end the show with a story, right? And I have the story today. Isabel has to get it next time, hopefully.
Okay. Okay.
Do you want to say something else, or should I go with the story?
No, go ahead with the story.
All right. It's a really cool story. I actually found it in a kind of a feminist book, but it's a good story anyways, because it's true. I shouldn't have said that. I'll probably have to cut it. So, I don't know if you're familiar with... Are you familiar with the story of El Cid? Did you ever see the movie with Charlton Heston?
No, I have not seen the movie, but Sister Gertrude was kind enough to tell us some of his story when I was in school. So I'm kind of familiar.
It's a really cool story. Yeah, it's a really cool story. The movie, I'm not sure if I would recommend it because it's a very Hollywood movie, so there would be some scenes that need to be cut. But basically what happened was Spain was overrun by the Muslims, and there was an effort from Spain to try to reconquer their country from the Muslims. And part of this effort was El Cid. El Cid was a knight, basically. And he became very famous because when the king died, there was a plot, apparently, where one of the brothers killed the other brother. The one that was going to be the heir of the throne was murdered by his brother. Or at least it was very suspicious that he had been murdered by his brother. So at the moment where this man took the kingdom, everybody owed his allegiance to him, and everybody knelt down, except for El Cid. El Cid actually stood up, and that was a huge challenge. Back then, that was like, worthy of death almost. So the king asked him, why don't you kneel? And he said, I don't kneel because I fear that you might have killed your brother. So I won't swear my allegiance to you until you make an oath here in front of everyone that you did not murder your brother. Only then can I swear allegiance to you. He was a real knight. Long story short, because of that, he was banished. Everything that he owned was taken away from him, even though he had been a really good soldier back to that time. And he suffered like a lot of injustice. And throughout all these things, his wife was with him. His wife, her name was Jimena, and she was the daughter of Alfonso V and of Doña Elvira. And they say of her, the authors from Spain say of her that she was very well read, she was very well educated. Women at that time, Isabel, knew Latin and Greek, some of them. She was very well read, she was very brave, she was very obedient to her husband as well, and very loving. And she was known particularly for being modest and very simple and very kind to everyone. So much so that all the soldiers respected her as if she was the queen. Like they would actually, have a lot of respect for her. Just what we were talking about. So when the Cid was banished and he was deprived of all his possessions, he was basically went out into the wild with nothing but his horse. She went with him, and she stood up for everything with him. Finally, at one time, El Cid regained favor with the king, and they actually reconquered the city of Valencia, which was one of the strongholds of the Muslims. And the story, do you remember the story of how he died and what happened afterwards?
Because it's forever ago.
That's the best part. He died during the Battle of Valencia, but the Muslims were afraid of El Cid. Like they were so afraid of him because he was like a real knight. So the Spaniards, they had him inside the city, and he died. And they were like, what are we gonna... I mean, as soon as the Muslim army finds out that he died, they're gonna rip us apart. And the Muslim army, in the Muslim army, they started, the rumor started that the Cid had died. So everybody was like, yes, now is our time. And they got all together and they were going to attack the city the next morning. The next morning, the Spaniards, they tied him up to his horse and they put a rig on his horse so that he would look like he was riding. And when they opened the gates and they went out against the Muslims, and the Cid was riding in his horse dead.
Wow.
I mean, the man was dead, but he was just riding with the army, and the Muslims were fleeing away from him. Like they started fleeing because they all heard that he was dead. They come up and they see him alive riding in front of the army. They're like, this guy is, who knows what he is. So they all started running away and they slaughtered them. They totally won the war, or they won the battle, I should say. After that, there was a victory there, but then after that, the city was still there. But guess who took the control of the city, or at least who was helping a lot with the management of the city?
It was his wife.
Yeah, you know that because you read the
only just now.
His wife took over, and she wasn't leading the army, obviously. There was someone else leading the army, but she was there morally supporting the armies. And for 2 years, they continued helping and pushing to defend the city. It got really rough at one point. They were besieged again by the Muslims, and she had to ask for help to Alfonso VI. But even after that, even during that siege, she was still there for 7 months, helping to keep the city under the power of the Christian armies. All that because she took what her husband had did, and she said, this is our inheritance, this is what we have to do, this is our mission, and she kept it going. So once again, you have the woman working besides men. Just a really beautiful story.
I had never really paid attention that far into the story to hear about what happened after his death and with his wife. That's pretty incredible. Thank you, Father. Thank you again, of course, for being on this episode with me, Father. There are many topics and points that we made that I think pretty intense, but they were needed. That concludes this episode of The Young Woman. My name is Isabel Martinez, and you're listening to The Catholic Wire.
Thank you for listening to The Catholic Wire. If you have found the show helpful, please say a prayer for all our collaborators. Don't forget to subscribe to our channels and share with your friends. For questions and comments, you may contact us at thecatholicwire.org.